Well, welcome everybody. This is going to be a great learning experience for me and hopefully for all of you too. So my name is Alison McCaffrey. I'm currently an assistant principal with the Calgary Catholic School District. I've taught in a special education setting for about 3 or 4 years. Before that, I was predominantly in Division 2. So I love teaching the kids with special ed because I really do find that they teach me more than I can ever teach them, and it's just been such a rewarding experience. So I was happy when Joni asked me to come and present this workshop that was developed by the ATA. So I hope you get as much out of it as I've learned from it. So if we look, you see about me, I have 2 kids. I guess that's who I am first. I'm a teacher that spends way more time at school than I should, according to my 2 kids. And when I'm not at school, I'm either at my plays or traveling, which is the best way for me to relax. The goals today that we're going to get through today is to understand the nature and the prevalence of learning disabilities. And hopefully the majority of the time is that we're going to be able to discuss and experience a variety of strategies. I really do think that that the collective wisdom of the group is a lot stronger than anything that I can provide to you or anything that you'll get out of the handout. So I think the best learning that I've ever found in professional development is the opportunity to work together. And as we were saying, even if you don't have the audio, a lot of the opportunities will be to be able to use that text box and add your comments and participate fully that way. So don't worry if you've had a challenge with the audio, because most of the stuff is doing the text box. So back to the workshop. Our goal here today isn't to present a philosophical position or a debate whether inclusion is necessary or whether it's acceptable or whether we agree with it or not. It just accepts the reality that in today's schools that we have, I'm sure every single classroom that you're with, you're going to find students with mild or moderate learning disabilities. And our goal as teachers is simply to find ways to allow them to be as successful as possible. So as we go into this, I would love it if you could spend a moment right now, and this will be your first chance to use some of those great tools that Dan had, the text box perhaps. I wonder if you could just spend a minute or two to think about one of the students in your class who may have a mild or moderate learning disability, even if it's not diagnosed. We know that typically the classroom teacher is the first one that gets that gut feel that, hey, you know what, something's just not right there. Who was that child that brought you here this afternoon to sit through this webinar? Like, who was the person that you're saying to yourself, give me some more strategies to help? And what are some of the challenges that he or she is presenting to you right now? But perhaps you want to share some of the challenges you're finding right now with the student or students in your class. What is that student in your pocket that you're going to be keeping at the front of your mind for the rest of this webinar and trying to find some solutions? So if you wouldn't mind, I'll give you a minute or two. Just jot down your concerns either on the slide here, or if you don't feel comfortable enough to share that way, just jot them down on a piece of paper so that person's sitting with you for the rest of the webinar. So I think we see a wide range, but this is sort of a typical range that we're seeing in almost every classroom. We see the students with the attention challenges, whether that's the inattentive ones or the hyperactive ones. We have a lot of students that have the ability to perform, but they have the really challenging expression. So difficulty expressing themselves, whether it's in writing, whether it's verbally, whether it's just getting their ideas out. And you can see the frustration in their eyes that they know what they want to say, but it's just not coming out. Focus is a huge one. And then developmental coordination. I seem to see that happening a little bit more, and that they just seem to not have it. Everything just doesn't flow together easily. And so doing something as simple as writing is always a challenge. I think for most of us, we're finding that within our classrooms, you're not finding just one student that you can focus your time on. You're finding 3 or 4 students that you have to find some strategies. And that's the thing that I like about the strategies that you'll develop together later on, is that the strategies that are successful aren't going to be just successful for a single child. If you find a great strategy, typically those successful strategies will be beneficial to those students with a variety of learning disabilities, but also those students that don't have learning disabilities. So it's sort of that UDL, universal design for learning, that a great strategy is good for all students. So some great ideas. It tells me why you're here. So thank you for your participation, and thanks, Dan, for getting that thing up. Let's move on to doing that first goal of the workshop, which is just having a basic understanding of what are learning disabilities. And obviously, from your contributions, you have a pretty good handle on it. But let's do it through a different, it's called two facts and a fib. On the next couple slides, well, we'll do one slide at a time. There's 3 statements. If you can use your toolbar at the side and go, I'm going to ask you to put a check mark beside the statement that is a fib, that's not accurate. So let's take a look at the first slide. So students with learning disabilities tend to have deficits in short-term memory. In looking at test scores, you'll often find these scores below the 25th percentile. If you think that that's not accurate, once we read the other 2, you'd put a check mark beside that one. Students with learning disabilities have a cognitive disability, which is why learning takes longer. Or about 1/3 of all students with learning disabilities have attention difficulties as well. So which one of those statements do you think is not accurate? Just put a check mark or a smiley. Can't remember the choices you have. I think it was a check mark or an X. Whatever you feel comfortable, put it beside the one that you don't think is accurate. Looking at these, looking at the first one, so learning disabilities actually refer to the number of disorders which may affect the acquisition, organization, retention, and understanding of verbal or nonverbal information. These disorders affect learning in individuals who otherwise demonstrate at least an average ability essential for thinking or reasoning. As such, learning disabilities are distinct from global or intellectual deficiencies or cognitive disabilities. So the second one, where it says students who with LDs have cognitive disabilities, that's not, according to how we classify them, accurate, because those students actually are just considered cognitively delayed. Learning disabilities, though, result from impairments in one or more processes related to perceiving, thinking, remembering, or learning. So these can be limited, or include but not limited to language, as a lot of your comments were, phonological processing, visual, memory, attention, and executive functioning. So the one that's not accurate is the second one. But as we said, this is the one that causes a lot of us difficulties within the classroom. Not only do many of our students have learning disabilities, they also have what's going on with them at the same time. Comorbid with it, we call it, is that they're having those attention difficulties, which makes the learning even more difficult. Let's take a look at the second slide and see if you can be as great on that one as the first one. Here's the 3 different facts. Learning disabilities are easy to identify and therefore do not need a formalized assessment to be accurately diagnosed. As many as 50% of students with LD will drop out of school prior to the high school grad. And the third one is students with an LD are more likely to encounter trouble with the law. Which one do you think is not accurate? So I think this was an easy slide for everyone because you got it right. Learning disabilities, well, I think sometimes as teachers we find them easy to identify, but to accurately figure out where the challenges are with the students, you truly need a psycho-ed to really delve deep and to dig into where the actual break in their learning is, and where what strategies can really help you, and to tease out the whole picture of the student. The concerning part we know as a society and in our classrooms, and the sad thing is that the second bullet point there, that it's pretty disconcerting when we think that as many as 50% of the students with LDs are going to end up dropping out of high school. And then that lends itself, there's no surprise to number 3 then, is there? If you feel that you're struggling and school was a challenge and so on and so forth, it's just overwhelming, and the connection to having trouble with the law seems a pretty easy step there, doesn't it? So for many reasons, but if for no other reason, for our social and our justice system, it would be appreciated if we could, provide these students with the supports that they need earlier on. So Let's move on. So now you know what an LD is. We could go into it a lot longer, and all the psychologists of the world are going, it takes a lot longer to understand an LD than that. But let's move on. This is a cartoon that many of you have seen before, but I think it's a great summary of what it must feel to have a learning disability. And everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And I think sometimes, you know, if you're giving a student with a reading challenge, a comprehension quiz when they can't even read the passage, are they the fishes of our world? So one of the things I wanted to offer to you is that there's a passage that does replicate a challenge that some of our students with reading difficulties might face. So your task now is I'm going to give you a minute or two to read the following passage. So imagine what it would feel like if you were in a typical classroom. You're given this, and you know the teacher, as we often want to say, oh, there'll be 5 quick comprehension questions at the end. You have about 3 minutes, and make sure that you break down the words and chunk your words, and make sure you go slow enough that you understand it. What I'd like you to do is to read the next slide, and then start. If you wouldn't mind, and Dad will put up the text box toolbar. Tell me how you're feeling as you're reading it. Do you feel pretty proud of yourself that you're going to be able to tackle those 5 comprehension questions with great ability? So go ahead and read. I know it's a little bit small. I apologize that it's not that big, but can you hardly wait for the test that I'm going to give you at the end about what this is all about? So I see a lot of the similar feelings. It's very, very frustrating. I agree. And imagine the stress it's added onto their shoulders, knowing that they have to be doing an assessment at the end based on it. I wonder what the quality of that assessment will be, and if it's a multiple choice, will they just be guessing? Or if there's more questions, and the questions look like this gobbledygook like this is, do they even have any clue what to do? And then when they get comments like, well, you know, just break up the word, break it up into the small pieces that you understand, which is what I've been guilty of many a times. Like, we have terrific reading strategies. Break it down, chunk your words, see if you can recognize any other words. If we had pictures, we'd probably tell them to take a look at a picture. Or we say, come up to the teacher when they have a minute, but then the teacher's like, well, what part of this may you not be able to understand? So the slide isn't here to make fun of anyone with a learning disability or to laugh at them, but it's to understand about, can you imagine how tired a student with a learning disability would feel at the end of the day if this is what they're looking for, and always having to use the brain power it takes to get through something like this, if they're doing that for 6 or 7 hours a day. A couple of you said a lost interest. Have you not seen those students that seem to be daydreaming all the time, your little LD students? It's so frustrating. Have you ever seen some of your LD students get into a fight or just lash out, maybe not physically, but just with the words, or throw their papers on the ground, or just refuse to do the task? Some people didn't even give up. I'm just going to guess at what you want. So, and I like the one about it would be difficult to even explain what you're seeing. So when the teacher would come up and say, well, what part don't you understand? Well, I don't even know if a child could explain how they're not seeing it the same way that the teacher is. So I always find this kind of simulation quite, I feel quite appreciative of about how difficult it must be for some of the students to get through their day, and especially how exhausting. I mean, I've seen some kids with LDs being asleep by the afternoon. Well, so they're sort of like the kindergartens, grade 1s. Remember how when they move from kindergarten to grade 1, how many of those students end up sleeping the first couple months because they're not used to working that hard? Well, that's what a student with an LD feels like all day, every day, I think. So thank you for your participation. That's fantastic that you guys are all participating and chiming in and seeing what I'm seeing. If you want to do more of these, or perhaps bring it back to your staff so that they can take a look at some of these simulations, there's a great this website here, Misunderstood Minds by PBS here, has got some math simulations and some language arts simulations online, and it's great fun to go in. Great fun. It's great fun if you don't have a learning disability, but it's quite eye-opening to go in and challenge yourself to see how difficult it is to try and comprehend something that we completely take for granted. So I know you have access to this webinar later, and I know that this address is in the handout that Dan is sending you. Either you got it before, or you'll get it right after the webinar. But if you want to pass this website on to your friends or to other people within your organization, it's a great place to just get a little bit of empathy and a little bit of understanding of what it feels like to have a challenge such as a learning disability. So if we're moving along right now, so if they can't learn the way that we're teaching them, then I guess our only other option is that we must start to teach them the way that they learn. So what does that look like with their students? Typically, there's two different ways that we can adapt the program or modify the program. And I'm talking to all of you, so I'm in the Catholic board, so we say we're preaching to the choir here. So modifying the program, I'll just remind you, and it took me years and years and years to understand the two, but not to understand it, but I always flip the terms. So when we're talking tonight, when we talk about modifying the program, that might look either changing what the students are expected to learn, changing what students demonstrate they understand, and or completely different learning outcomes from the program of studies, your typical program of studies. So that's typically we modify the program for our cognitively delayed students, not necessarily our students with learning challenges. But more commonly within our classrooms, we make the accommodations through adapting our program. And you'll find there's typically three types of accommodations. One is a classroom or physical accommodations, so your alternative seating, you're adapting to the different devices. You might have them on the iPad so that they can, use something like drag and speak and talk into the iPad so that if they have challenges writing, but they're quite good verbally, they would just talk into it. There's different instructional accommodations, which would be providing notes, or if they have vision challenges, making the notes larger, alternative reading materials. And the third one is testing and evaluation accommodations. So giving them extra time, giving them an oral test over a written test, if that's how they are going to be more successful. Again, I know that all of you are currently doing that, and we'll talk about that more in a lot more detail. The nice thing about the handout that you will that Dan sent out to you this afternoon by email is that it has a lot. There's a beautiful chart in there about the different adaptations, about the physical, about your evaluative, instructional, and classroom. There's a bunch of different. It's almost like a checklist that you can just take a look, and if you've got student Joe Blow and what kind of adaptations can I make for his success? So maybe you want to move him closer to the teacher. Maybe you want to post a schedule on the board. It just gives you a bunch of really quick adaptations that will help you quickly just to support you and your student in the learning. So let's move on. So when we think more of adapting our program, there's 6 main categories of learning disabilities. You see that there's a visual processing, auditory, so visual would be just, sight, auditory, that they are taking it in, but then it's hard for them to bring back out. Motor coordination difficulties, if I remember from one of those first slides, one of you was saying that there was gross motor challenges with a couple of your students. Social skills difficulties, organizational difficulties. These are our kids that, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. It's those are probably kids closest to my heart. And conceptualization difficulties. They just can't seem to put it all together. So my goal is to make it a little bit more interactive rather than, I know you've heard my voice for a while, that I hope that we can work together and start finding some strategies that can help us. Obviously, this learning disabilities workshop is sometimes done in a full day, and you would spend a lot of time at this point taking each of these 6 categories and really digging deep into them and really looking at a carousel of different strategies and ideas. We don't have that kind of time, so I've just chosen a couple of the main areas, the ones I think that we could all benefit from, the collective knowledge here to get some strategies going. And I would love it if over the next couple slides we could work together to what strategies have been useful for you, what strategies would you recommend? And the first area that I chose that we could talk about a little bit deeper is the organizational difficulties of our students. I find, again, the reason I chose this goes back to what I was saying before. I'm a believer that if I'm going to, as a teacher, put a lot of effort into finding strategies that are going to support my learning disability student, I want it to be I'm trying to think the proper term, but go across all of my students. I want it to be successful for all of my students. And I definitely find organizational difficulties, I find it's got the most impact on my classroom management and on just how I work in my classroom every day. So when you think of this might be with the student that you have in the pocket. Is his desk the one that you can walk into his classroom and know where he sits, because he's sort of like that Linus on the Charles Schulz comics? There's stuff coming out of his desk. There's stuff coming out of his binder as he walks down the hall. He can't remember where he left his pencil. He can't remember. Some days it feels like he's losing his jacket daily. He forgets to bring in permission forms. There's not a day that goes by that you're just like, how can I help him? Because wow, in my day, my dad would say, you'd forget your head if it wasn't tied on. That's that kind of student that you have. So I'll give you a couple of some of the suggestions that I got from the handout that you have, but also some that I've used. And I would love it, you don't have to wait till I'm done talking here, but if you can share some ideas on how will you help a student like that. When I was at my last school, which was for grade 4 to 6 kids that have been diagnosed with learning disabilities, the whole class was with learning disabilities, most of them had organizational difficulties off of the roof. So we color coded everything. So my math was red, my social was yellow, my religion was green, and so on. I went so far as to even have that for their photocopies. So every photocopy for math was done on yellow photocopy paper. Every photocopy for their language arts was done on pink, so that when it happened, which would be 30 times a day, that they would drop a piece of paper, at least they could then go find the duotang, because guess what? The duotang was the same color as the sheet of paper. And then when we put the schedule on the board, what color would math be? It would be the same color as their duotang, which was the same color as their handouts, and so on. So color coding works great for these kids. I also, on almost every single student, again, I was lucky that I was in a class of 12. They all had LDs, so they were a little bit challenged, but I had individual timers, but I don't know if you need an individual one for the class, but everything was brought down to, you have 5 minutes to do this, or let's get one question done in 1 minute, because a lot of times these kids just couldn't get started. But if they were always playing beat the clock or you have to work on this for 5 minutes and then you get a break for 3 minutes. Everything was based on time, just so that they couldn't get into that attention deficit where their brain would be, in the stars, and it just kept refocusing them. So those are 2 of the ideas that I have for this. What are some of your ideas? Again, I look at it that our collective knowledge is stronger than anything I can bring forward. If you wouldn't mind sharing, what are some of the ideas? You can either type it in the chat box over to the side if you find the notepad at the front difficult, or just type on. I see a couple comments already, some great comments about how have you managed, and how do you find success with your students that are just a little bit challenging in the organizational department. I've been madly talking only to realize that my microphone was muted, so perhaps, so I'll go back and do a couple of the things that I was saying. I love the picture list inside the lockers. I think that these students, many of them have reading challenges as well, and to have pictures, it really makes it a quick, fast check for them. I've noticed in the past that if you try and keep it to the minimum, maybe a maximum of 3 in every instruction, it seems to work best rather than having a whole bunch more than that. Try and chunk their challenge or chunk their day into so that you're only giving them three steps at a time. Then they don't seem to get lost in all of the different steps. I love the kids' email. I think that puts a lot of the responsibility back to where it needs to be, which is with the students, isn't it? I've used Remind 101, but that was always my responsibility as a teacher to send out the emails to the parents. But I think that's a great idea. Oh, there's someone else noticed. Yeah, Remind app, exactly. That's terrific. The other thing that I found was really, really important is having that visual schedule somewhere in the room and quite large so that they can always be accessing it. I find that the anxiety in a learning disability student is really ratcheted up when they don't know what's coming. So many of them don't really transition all that well, and if you have it laid out nice and in a place that they're used to accessing, it might reduce a bunch of the questions. What's coming up next, Ms. McCaffrey? When are we going to gym? Is gym today? And just if they get into the habit of self-advocating and learning their schedule and having a place that they can look for it, I think it really is a powerful tool for them. There's some terrific ideas here. I love the consistency. These students with learning disabilities, I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that they like routine. The more routine you have and the more organization you have in the classroom and the more laid out it is, the comfort that they have and that they know how to perform and they know how to succeed seems to be significantly reduce their anxiety. So that's fantastic. Modeling is always important. I love that. And Dan, thank you. I agree that these will, there's no way that we can write them all down right now. So the fact that you have access to the slide later just gives you a bunch of different ways to access this material. Regular video presentations, I love that. How to do it, then practice routinely. That's terrific. And the other thing that I really think is that to break down every assignment into really manageable steps. And scaffold them to their success is how we always looked at it. I think we could talk about this one because every classroom's got 3 or 4 of these students that would benefit from that. If you don't mind, I think we'll move on so that we can move on, get the collective knowledge again for our next area. If you have one of your students that you wrote down, if that's your student in your pocket, maybe some of these ideas will be beneficial to you. And I know that Dan sent out that email this afternoon. I see a couple people never got it. If you didn't get it, if you don't mind just sending in the chat room box, maybe just put down that you never got it, and then we'll get it out to you, no problem. But there's also a ton of additional ideas for, helping these students with their organizational challenges. So conceptual difficulties, for example, for mathematics. So typically you've got conceptual difficulties with language arts versus mathematics. Same thing, I would love it if you would participate by either through the chat room or on the whiteboard there and give us your ideas on how you help your struggling students here. Some of the things that I've done, and I think these are not rocket science ideas, it's just what I have but have found a lot of success for me. So the use of number lines on their desks, I just find that I go back and back and back to that. I've taught up to grade 9 and I've taught down to kindergarten, and it doesn't matter which grade. Having a really hands-on, accessible, manipulative like that is really supports all students, not just, early elementary or young elementary. Use of calculators. There was a time that, oh, you're cheating if you're using a calculator. If these kids can't add, but they know how to do the concept, who are we? I always believe that if they're always carrying incorrectly and they have the basic, they know how to do the math, I'd rather them show me how to do the math rather than worrying whether they can add 15 plus 9 and they constantly give me 23 rather than 24. So really taking a look at giving them the tools that they need for their success. It doesn't mean if they can prove to you that they know how to add, then move on and stop them from having to spend 25 minutes trying to add 15 plus 9. Let them use the calculator. The other area that I've used over, thank you for all of the contributions already on the screen. That's terrific. The one thing that I've used a lot in the last couple of years is an interactive notebook, sort of like their study guide, and it's got lots of color and lots of hands-on activities in there, and they actually develop it themselves, so it becomes, rather than just a boring one-sheet study guide, they've created the book and they know where the information is, and it just seems that for my students, they've really taken that on as something that really helps them with their success. And of course, we hear this all the time, but try and move all tasks as kinesthetically as possible. Our students seem to absorb it better when they can do it. So I just, a couple different lessons. I do bed mass, order of operations. We do it by doing hopscotch outside, and we do slides and rotations by actually getting up and moving. So those are a couple of suggestions that I pulled from our handout and pulled from my actual class experience, and I love some of them. I'll just stop talking for a bit and let you add some more. I love the allow the cheat sheet for formulas. Like, I guess it goes back to, and this isn't an assessment workshop, and we could have a long discussion about what are you evaluating and what are you assessing. I've moved from my early teaching to where I am now. Exactly. For every learning disability student I have, it's basically for them an open book exam, because it sort of goes back to the calculators. Am I looking to see if they understand the concept and can apply it, or am I testing them on whether they can memorize things? And if they've got terrible working memory, they will never be able to memorize a formula like area, even though for us, length times width is something that would come really easy to us. For these kids, they will never be able to do that. So why are we putting them at a disadvantage? So I love the allowing a cheat sheet for those students that need it. And again, I thought I was so radical when I allowed it, and then you start reading the assessment stuff and realize you're just doing the right thing for the students, that they need it. I like the strategies, draw it out, simplify numbers, and talk it out. There's that expression, if a student can explain it to someone else, that's how you really know that they understand. I love having them, in the last slide, someone said use a buddy system. I love having them in math talk to each other. Like I like a loud math class, positively loud, that where they're constantly explaining to each other how did they get it, because if they can do that, we know that they really understand it. And then someone else is also agreeing with that, orally explaining how to complete a problem. So they may not be able to do the numbers part of it, but if they can tell you how to get to the answer, I think that shows you that they understand the outcome there for many times. I love using technology in the right way. Exactly. Find the YouTube videos, Khan Academy, a lot of those different options where they go through the steps and support the students. Manipulatives have always been, again, I'm dating myself, but originally manipulatives were done by grade 6. Now I think that the power of our junior high and high school classes are when they're actually touching and feeling and manipulating and creating volume and creating different things and using cubolinks. Like, there's nothing that makes me feel better than going into grade 9 class and seeing them use cubolinks, and everyone's like, oh, they won't be able to deal with it. I think that it really, for some of our kids, it's so important that they actually can touch and feel and and use those manipulatives. They shouldn't be put away when they graduate from grade 6. I'm not familiar with the KEG and cooperative learning, but I'll look it up and take a look. That sounds pretty exciting. And like this, the top comment right under the mathematics, information is so available on the internet, kids can find it and let them access the resource. Again, it's sort of like them having the cheat sheet or the formulas. If we're trying to assess what they know versus how they get, if we want to assess their ability to do the task, do we care the numbers? If they know how to do it and get the information off the internet and can explain it to you, I think that they've succeeded in what the outcome is, which is to know how to do the outcome. Learning through games is always really important, and it keeps them engaged a lot more. So again, I would say that this typically is a full-day seminar or a full-day workshop. Can you see how we could be working on this for quite some time and then sharing our ideas? But if you don't mind, I'm just going to go on just so that we can consider where we're going from here, because I'm looking at time and being cognizant of the fact that I want to respect your time. If you don't mind, I'm going to move on, even though there's some fascinating and amazing, great ideas. So are there any questions that you have for me, or that I can support you in any way? This workshop isn't one that you're going to be able to, I have student A, B, C, and what do I do to, and I'm putting, air quotes around to fix them. I can't help you with that, but is there anything that I can help you based on the information that you learned tonight that I could, clarify for you or address? Okay, I'm just going to move on then. Thank you. So in a little bit of a wrap-up, looking back at that student in your pocket, take a minute now to think of the strategies for the different learning disabilities and the different challenges we spoke of, and how can they impact that special student in your pocket that you brought with you tonight or keeping close to your heart tonight. What are the different strategies that we spoke of that you can bring back perhaps tomorrow or Monday, if you're one of those lucky few that have tomorrow off, to help support you and your student with their challenges, or maybe even to support those other students in your classroom? And thank you. I love the idea of, help yourself to put it up on the whiteboard there and give us some ideas. I appreciate your honesty about the more empathy that you have. I think it's a very tough thing, and especially I've noticed about how exhausted these students are, is that I did a simulation one whole day about as if I was a new English language learner, so it's not quite the same, but I went home and I think I was asleep by 4:15 after having to be in a different language all day. So that's the same feeling that these kids are too, that their brains are always firing at 150% just to keep. And they're not even keeping up, we know that. So just to be part of the class, and they're working as hard as they can. So I appreciate the honesty about saying more empathy. The question about what if a student refuses support, I think that goes back to one of our other participants with saying modeling. I think my suggestion there would be you just model through other students and through yourself what it would look like to have organizational skills, what it might look like to break down and support them with math. And if you're looking at a lot of your supports as the universal supports that are going to support all students, most of the time you're not even pinpointing out that student that has a learning challenge, because all of these supports, a number line should be on every student, not just every student's desk, not just the students with learning disabilities. A multiplication chart, why not have that on every student? If you have those, if they're fidget busters and you want to have those rubber bands around the bottom of their desk, put them on all of the students' desk initially, so the student won't stand out. And the kids that need the supports will use them. The kids that don't need them, after a week or two, those elastic bands will be pushed down to the bottom, and you'll know the kids that need them. So it's very difficult when you want to help a student and they're not accepting the help. So I would just put it out and do it as you're supporting the class, and it's going to make your whole class better. Well, fantastic. I think that, you know, you can probably see why this workshop could be a half day or a full day workshop with all the great ideas that you've already given me, and probably how much more you could talk about it. When you're looking after the workshop, there's a bunch of different resources you can access. So as members of the ATA, you can always access the ATA librarian when there's books, journals, multimedia resources, additional resources that you are welcome as a member of the ATA to pull out free, and they'll send it to you. And especially if you're doing higher education and looking for additional resources, let's say for your master's or additional your TPGP, get them to send you some terrific resources. And they even send, the nicest part about it is they send you a little label that you can send it back to them for free. So at the cost of Canada Post today, that's the best part. If you like this workshop and you'd like to see it longer, perhaps in your school for your PD days or after school to support your other teachers that are there, if you go online at under PD at Alberta Teachers Association, you can book the workshops for the best deal going, which is $100 plus GST. And we bring out all of the materials. The facilitator is there, and our goal is that you will walk away with different strategies regardless of the workshop. And I believe there's, Joni, maybe you can text me or put it in the chat box. I can't remember how many different workshops. I think there's about 25 workshops right now. And it ranges from FNMI workshops to learning disabilities to learning with the brain in mind. A big popular one that's going on right now, which is called Unseen Hurts, which is all about resiliency. So that's a really popular one. So those are all $100 plus GST. Teacher welfare member services, easily accessible through your ATA. And if you don't already join us, have a membership to a specialist council, you should do that because it's free. You get one free one every year. So if you haven't done that, I would encourage you to go onto the website and sign up for one. And there's grants and bursaries. And if you want to help out and you like what you heard tonight, or you like to do this as well, they're always looking for ATA instructors that would help facilitate workshops, so you can contact them and see how you go about doing that. If you have any questions, my email is there. You can contact me directly. I know Joni Turville is available if you want to contact her directly about any issues. Dan will send you, if you didn't get the handout, he'll resend that to you, or I can resend that to you if you want to send it to me that you didn't get it. And I hope you gained some strategies that you can use over the next couple days, and I hope you have a great night. Thank you.